Hey friends, I'm Christy and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. And we are in the middle of March Women's History Month. I'm having so much fun with the variety of conversations that I am bringing to you on my longer Wednesday episodes. And on today's Sunday Shortie, I wanted to talk a little bit about my writing project. This past week, I attended a virtual summit. It was the Women in Publishing Summit. I got to talk about my life, talk about my most recent work, which is a historical fiction manuscript, and talk about my memoir called Strong Roots, Wayward Soul. Some of you may have read my first book, and a lot of you have complimented my writing and are eager to get more of my writing into your hands. I've been writing a weekly blog off and on since 2019. My original website was Cultivating Kindness, and that was a blog I sent out on a weekly basis. It's been through a couple of name changes, but in general, it remains about self-help, maybe a little humor as it feels appropriate, and anything that inspires you to live out loud and also normalize all the things that we go through. And especially if you are like me, maybe have been quiet or shy for most of your life, you're working to live outside of your comfort zone and a little apprehensive to do that. I also talk to a lot of women who cling to perfectionist tendencies. That has definitely been me in my life. And my learning from Ali Van Vossen in my yoga community really unlocked the idea for me of imperfect action. And that is part of what I try to teach women when I walk them through my Thrive framework is to, start before you're ready, because there's a lot of things that you won't know when you're starting something new. One of those projects for me was writing my memoir, which I self-published in 2021. And at the time, I wanted it to be about my grandmother, Polly Campbell. She was approaching 100. She died just 3 months shy of her 100th birthday. She was a proud teetotaler, a woman of God. She was firm in her faith and inspired others because of her generosity of spirit. And even before I stopped drinking, I wanted to be a better person because of her. And when I think about boat rocking role models, it's a little ironic because she was a people pleaser. She didn't intentionally make waves or have these messy conversations, but she was fiercely independent. And I know a lot of my fierce independence comes from that woman. When I first began writing, I was going to write our story. She died in August of 2016. I was determined to start writing her story. I had not written anything beyond a blog up until that point, and I had even shelved writing for 20 years. I had not written a short story or a poem like I did in my childhood since my early 20s. I had all these documents. We had drawers full of notes that she had taken. She had been the treasurer for a church, so she had documents of church history, and someone in my dad's family had done a ton of genealogy work, so we had all these genealogy documents, and I just knew I could put together this story that would tell about the life of Polly Campbell so that I could memorialize her forever. I started down the work of the research, and it felt so overwhelming. I began to worry that I was going to fall short on telling her story. I worried about how to get in touch with people who could share things about her and her impact on their lives, especially as time continued to go by. And I also, deep down, wondered if people wanted to memorialize her in the way that I did. She was loved and admired and respected by all of her church congregation and all of the people in her lives, but she was almost 100 years old. Most of her friends and her family, brothers, had all passed away. So it was going to be really difficult to piece together early parts of her life. I still have a 1-hour video interview that I took with her, and I have this idea to turn it into a podcast episode, which I think would be incredible. But I just didn't know how to start. And when I got sober in May of 2018, I wanted to follow in her footsteps. We had her piano, and I wanted to learn to play piano. I wanted to learn to sew, just like my grandmother had. I threw myself into hobbies that mirrored what she had done with her life. And that became the story. I started to write about all of the ways that she positively impacted my life. I wrote about things that we didn't see eye to eye on, like when I stopped going to church and became more spiritual than religious. I wrote about how I always felt like I let her down, that there were times that I was drunk or hungover around her that filled me with shame. I wrote about all of these things with her and my relationship as the central theme to the story. Now, as I started to write the story, I also started to learn more about my other grandmother, Gladys, and that's my mom's mom. And we started digging into some of the things that we had that were hers. We have her diary from the 1930s. We have letters that my grandfather wrote to her when he was in the Civilian Conservation Corps and then in the Coast Guard during World War II. She went out to work in California, so she was a real-life Rosie the Riveter. And I started to write about her, and so my first book, my memoir, Strong Roots, Wayward Soul, intertwines my life with my grandmother's. I take some steps back into the past to talk about what life was like during their young adulthood and tie that back to what was happening in my life. And I'm so proud of how that turned out. And I just wrote the stories. I worked with a coach very early on. My friend Sandra had a Change Your Story program at the time, and I worked with her, and we just got the stories on paper. Then I started to form an outline. Then I started to write chapters. Then I worked with a developmental editor and got it into something more readable, because I can guarantee you, you are going to hate your first draft. Ernest Hemingway said every first draft is poop, only he didn't use the word poop. I've heard Brene Brown then adopt that into a more modern, poopy first draft. And that's true. Your first work is getting the story on paper. And then you go back and edit. And you work with editors as your budget allows. And you work with line editors and proofreaders to get it to a polished point. Now, there's a lot of controversy around AI and using that, but if you don't have a budget for editing, that's a possibility. I would say there's still a lot of room for error there. But my point is, anyone could tell their story. What I hear so often is women who want to tell their story, but they're not sure that it means anything. I am one person on this planet of 8 billion people, and there are about 400 people and counting who have read my story. And because it's been 5 years, I would have to go back and count up how many women have reached out to say, hey, your book helped me get or stay sober, or wow, I'm sober and your story really made me feel less alone. So if you are interested in telling your story, do it. That is one of the types of clients that I love to work with in my Thrive programs. If you want some help with that and just getting to the starting line of your book, I can help you. My most recent work, which is the piece that we are tying back to all of the March podcasts, is a historical fiction novel based on Gladys and her time working in the shipyards. Now, I have a lot of material to work from that helps me understand what was going on during that time period. And I turned that into a complete work of fiction. So the main character, Ollie, that's my great-grandmother's name. My main character, Ollie, is loosely based on my grandmother. She's married to a character that's very much like my grandfather. Then she works in the shipyard with 3 other women, actually 4, but one of them's just kind of a tertiary character. But there's 3 main women who each have their own stories to tell. One of them's an aspiring actress. So you've heard on the podcast my conversation with my friend Christy, who has the Screening Lounge podcast and knows more about TV and film than any other person I know. So we talked about Hollywood history. There is Molly, who is relieved that her husband is stationed overseas because he is violent at home. And there will be a conversation coming this week. I interviewed the president and CEO of the Archway shelter in Dallas-Fort Worth, and we'll be talking about domestic violence, resources that you can use if you or someone you know is dealing with that at home. There is a character who is a lesbian in 1942 when you couldn't be freely open about your sexuality. What did that mean to live with a roommate? And then there is Ollie, who is dealing with the sheltered life that she lived on the farm, moving to the city, finding her independence, finding her voice. Feels a little bit like me and what is happening in my life. And I certainly know that Gladys, even though I didn't know her as well, and she had Alzheimer's in her last few years of life, I spent a lot of time with her as a kid. And I was talking to someone recently about what a shame it is that we don't know to ask our grandparents all the questions that we want to know when we're adults, right? Like, how were our lives similar? But just in reading and learning about her, I realized that we were very similar. So over the course of time and over the course of the story, Ollie is really doing some soul searching about what she wants out of life. And I got to talk to our nominee and winner, Cindy Sims, about what life is like in a small town and the unconventional roles that she had in her career that mirror all of these women who went off to the shipyards and had these careers that were traditionally reserved for men. But all of the men were off fighting in the war, and so women had to step in. And what's interesting in the research I've done is that men were resentful, and that creates a point of tension in my novels. I'm definitely in the early stages of editing, met some amazing women at the Women in Publishing Summit who can help me with editing and getting it published. Whether or not I'm going to go traditional publishing or self-publishing, I'm not sure yet. Traditional publishing is not all it's cracked up to be. With nonfiction, you have to have a very large platform. And with fiction, you just have to have the right agent at the right time. And that may be the route that I go. And we'll see what kind of rejections I get and what happens with that. You get an advance, and then you have to sell enough books to pay off that advance. So you still have to be the face of the book. You have to market it. You have to help drive sales. Those publishing houses don't do that for you. So I just thought I'd give that little tidbit around traditional versus self-publishing. Self-publishing, it's all your work, every single word of it. You pick the title, you pick the cover art. There are some hybrid publishers who will help you with that. But self-publishing is all you. Hybrid publishers might have editing and cover design services. There's also freelancers that you can find to do all of that. And then traditional publishing is pitching agents who then have to go out and pitch your book to publishers to get that book deal. That is publishing in a nutshell. I am all self-taught. I have no formal writing education. I have no formal experience in my career other than my personal blog writing. I have now plugged into this incredible network of women who can help with all of those things. And my role in my coaching and my retreats is to get you to the starting line. You have a story you want to tell. You're afraid to tell it because you don't know how to do any of these things. You don't know about the writing process. You don't know about the publishing process. You don't know how to bring it to life. I've done it. I'm about to do it a second time, so I can help you with that. And I look forward to talking to you more. You can check out everything I offer at thrivewithchristy.com. I have 2 retreats coming up, and I'm penciling one in for the fall that will be writing focused. But know that my Thrive framework is really designed with either publishing a book or starting a small business in mind. I am grateful to everyone who has supported my work as an author and supported my writing. I'm excited to bring more of that to you. I have wanted to quit retail and write full-time for over 5 years, probably more like 10, and I am doing the damn thing and rocking the damn boat, and it is scary all the time, but I'm excited to do something with this manuscript. You'll be learning more about Ollie and the ladies in the Oakland shipyard as soon as I can get it to press. Thank you so much for listening this week, and I will talk to you again soon. You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.